Ambassador Reed stood at the massive window of the Intergalactic Council's observation deck, his aged hands clasped behind his back. The space before him sparkled with countless stars and the regular traffic of ships from 100 different worlds. After 50 years as chief observer, he thought he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. He was wrong. Another report from the outer sectors, Ambassador, his assistant said, holding out a datapad. Reed took it without turning, his eyes fixed on the peaceful scene before him. The report was anything but peaceful. The council chamber buzzed with the usual activities. Representatives from over 500 spacefaring civilizations went about their daily business of maintaining galactic peace. They all followed the same rules, the same protocols that had kept the galaxy stable for thousands of years. The most important of these was the surrender protocol. It was simple, really. When a stronger force demanded surrender, the weaker force would comply. This prevented needless death and destruction. It was logical. It was efficient. It was civilized. Every known species followed this basic rule of warfare. Well, almost every species. Reed walked to his desk, touching the surface to bring up the latest statistics. The numbers didn't lie. In the past month alone, 3 major powers had attempted to incorporate a newly discovered world into their territories. All 3 have failed. The planet was called Earth. "Playing the recording again, sir," his assistant asked as Reed activated the holographic display. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," Reed replied, watching as the scene unfolded once more. The hologram showed a massive fleet of Meridian warships, their sleek forms arranged in perfect attack formation around a blue-green planet. The Meridians were one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Their demand for surrender should have been met with immediate compliance. Instead, the humans had done something unprecedented. They had fought back. The recording showed Earth's primitive spacecraft, barely capable of interstellar travel, charging directly at the Meridian fleet. Their weapons were outdated, their shields were weak, and their tactics made no sense. They should have surrendered, but they didn't. "Look here," Reed pointed to a small Earth vessel. This ship had lost 60% of its hull integrity. By all normal protocols, they should have powered down and surrendered. He paused the recording. Instead, they accelerated into the Meridian command ship, causing significant damage to both vessels. His assistant shook his head in disbelief. "It defies all logical behavior patterns, sir." Reed nodded, his expression grave. The Council's entire peacekeeping system is built on the assumption that rational beings will surrender when faced with superior force. These humans, he trailed off, replaying another segment of the battle. The data was clear. Human ships continued fighting even when heavily damaged. Their crews refused to abandon dying vessels. They used tactics that put their own lives at risk, all to gain tactical advantages. It was chaos. It was madness. It was fascinating. "Sir," his assistant interrupted his thoughts, "the Council is gathering for an emergency session. They're requesting your presence." Reed straightened his formal robes and headed for the Council chamber. As he walked, he reviewed the facts in his mind. Humans had no surrender protocol. They fought harder when cornered. They used strategies that no other species would consider because of the risks involved. The massive doors of the council chamber opened before him. 500 representatives turned to face him, their expressions showing varying degrees of concern and curiosity. Reed took his place at the speaker's podium, knowing that his next words would shape the galaxy's approach to this unusual species. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "We face an unprecedented situation. We have discovered a species that does not follow the fundamental rules of civilized conflict. They do not surrender when outmatched. They do not yield when defeated. They do not follow protocol." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And perhaps that makes them the most dangerous species we have ever encountered." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. The galaxy's peaceful order was about to change forever. Commander Vale of the Meridian Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Star Sovereign. His silver uniform gleamed under the soft bridge lights as he watched Earth grow larger on the main view screen. This was supposed to be a simple mission: make contact, demand surrender, and add another planet to the Empire's territory. All ships in position, his second-in-command reported. The humans have detected our presence. Vale nodded. Open a communication channel to their primary defense stations. Let's follow standard protocol. The massive fleet of 300 Meridian warships hung in Earth's orbit like a wall of steel and energy. Their weapons could level cities. Their shields could withstand any known weapon in this sector of space. It was a show of force that had worked 1,000 times before. Channel open, Commander. Vale stepped forward, straightening his already perfect posture. Attention, planet Earth. This is Commander Vale of the Meridian Empire. Our forces now surround your world. We demand your immediate and unconditional surrender. Comply, and your civilization will be peacefully integrated into our empire. You have 10 minutes to respond. The bridge crew waited calmly. Some even looked bored. They had done this dozens of times before. The response they received, however, was anything but standard. A voice crackled through their speakers. "This is Admiral Rogers of the United Earth Defense Force." There was a pause, and Vale expected to hear the usual words of surrender. Instead, the human continued. "Let me make sure I understand. You came all this way to ask us to give up without a fight." Vale frowned. This wasn't how the protocol worked. Your forces are completely outmatched. Surrender is the logical choice. A strange sound came through the speakers. It took Vale a moment to recognize it as laughter. "Commander Vale," Rogers replied, "humanity has a saying. Come and take it." The transmission cut off. Vale's second-in-command looked confused. "Sir, they appear to be powering up their weapons. But they must realize they can't win." Before Vale could respond, the space around his fleet lit up with weapons fire. Earth's defenders had launched a full attack. Their ships, despite being technologically inferior, moved with surprising speed and coordination. "Impossible," Vale muttered as he watched small human vessels dart between his capital ships. "Raise shields. Return fire." But the humans weren't following any known combat protocol. Their smaller ships deliberately flew into the blind spots of Meridian targeting systems. Civilian vessels, which should have been fleeing, instead charged straight at Meridian ships with holds full of explosive materials. "Sir," his tactical officer shouted, "they're using their damaged ships as weapons." Vale watched in disbelief as a heavily damaged Earth destroyer, rather than surrendering, accelerated directly into one of his cruisers. Both ships erupted in a massive explosion that damaged 2 other Meridian vessels. "They're insane," someone on the bridge whispered. Another transmission came through. Admiral Rogers again. "Commander Vale, here's a counteroffer. Leave our solar system now, or we'll show you exactly why humans don't believe in surrender protocols." Vale's fleet had already lost 12 ships. Nothing in his training had prepared him for an enemy that fought harder when they should surrender, that treated combat like a puzzle to be solved, rather than a protocol to be followed. "Sir," his second-in-command said quietly, "we should contact the Council. This isn't right. They're breaking every rule of warfare." Vale stared at the screen, watching as more human ships launched from Earth. They were smaller, clearly inferior in every way to his vessels, but they flew with a determination he had never seen before. "Send the message," he ordered. "The Council needs to know. These humans, they're different. They don't just ignore the surrender protocol. They seem to enjoy doing it." As if to emphasize his point, another human ship dove through their formation, its weapons blazing even as it fell apart under Meridian fire. It was like watching poetry written in chaos and defiance. The galaxy's rules were about to change. The emergency council meeting was in chaos. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations talked all at once, their voices echoing off the grand chamber's walls. At the center of the room, Commander Vale's hologram stood next to Ambassador Reed, both watching as the council tried to make sense of the human situation. "They did what?" asked the representative of the crystal worlds, their crystalline form shimmering with confusion. Vale repeated his report, still looking shocked despite the days that had passed since the battle. "They used their damaged ships as weapons. When we disabled their engines, they rerouted power to weapons. When weapons failed, they turned their entire ships into projectiles." "Impossible," declared the Trade Federation's spokesperson. "No species would waste resources like that. Ships are valuable. Crew lives are valuable." Reed stepped forward. "That's what makes humans different. They value victory more than resources. They turn defeat itself into a weapon." The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed scenes from the Earth battle. The council members watched in silence as a small human vessel, barely the size of a Meridian scout ship, somehow disabled a main battle cruiser. "How did they do that?" someone asked. Vale looked uncomfortable. "They found a weak spot in our shield configuration, a flaw we didn't know existed. Their ship was too damaged to escape, so they used their remaining power to exploit the weakness." "But that's not in any combat manual," protested another representative. "How did they even think to try it?" Reed touched a control panel, bringing up historical data from Earth. "Humans have a long history of warfare among themselves. They've developed something they call innovative thinking under pressure. When standard tactics fail, they invent new ones. In the middle of battle." The council chamber grew quiet as this sank in. Innovation during combat was unheard of. War had protocols, rules. Everyone knew them. "There's more," Vale added. "We tried to adapt our tactics. We targeted their command centers, thinking they would surrender without leadership." He paused, shaking his head. "Instead, their forces broke into smaller groups and kept fighting. Each ship's crew made their own decisions, coordinating without central command." The Trade Federation representative stood up. "This violates everything we know about warfare. There must be a way to make them understand the proper protocols." "We tried diplomacy," Reed said. "We sent them copies of the standard surrender protocols. Their response was unexpected." The main display showed a new message from Earth. "Thanks for the manual on how you fight. We'll be sure not to do any of that. Here's our counteroffer. Leave us alone, or we'll keep finding new ways to surprise you." The Crystal World's representative's surface flickered with concern. "They're using our own protocols against us. By studying how we expect them to fight, they're learning how to do the opposite." Vale nodded. "In the last battle, they noticed our ships always target the largest threat first. So they started hiding their strongest weapons in their smallest ships. We lost 15 more cruisers before we realized what they were doing." Reed walked to the center of the chamber. "The humans have a concept they call thinking outside the box. While we see protocols as the solution, they see them as a puzzle to be solved. Every rule we follow becomes a weakness they can exploit." "Then what do we do?" asked someone from the back of the chamber. "How do we fight an enemy that doesn't follow any rules?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior observer, speaking for the first time, said, "Maybe that's our mistake. We're still thinking about fighting them. Has anyone considered what might happen if we tried to learn from them instead?" The chamber fell silent again. The idea of learning from a species that ignored protocols was radical, dangerous even. But as they watched more footage of human ships performing impossible maneuvers and trying tactics no one had ever imagined, a new thought began to spread through the council. Perhaps the humans weren't breaking protocol. Perhaps they were writing a new one. The council's research chamber was filled with holographic displays showing scenes from Earth's history. Ambassador Reed walked between them, studying each one carefully. What he saw both frightened and amazed him. "It's not that they don't know how to surrender," he explained to the gathered council members. "It's that they've learned to do something else entirely." The displays showed battles from Earth's past. Ancient warriors with swords refusing to retreat, small bands of fighters holding off larger armies, and sailors on wooden ships choosing to sink rather than give up. Look at this, Reed pointed to one display. A human commander named Leonidas. His 300 soldiers faced an army of thousands. By our protocols, they should have surrendered immediately. Instead, they fought until the very end. The Trade Federation representative stepped closer to the display. But they lost. What was the point? They lost the battle. Reed corrected, but their actions changed the entire war. Humans have a saying, win or lose, but never give up. They believe the act of resistance itself has value. Another display showed more recent history, cities rebuilding after disasters, communities surviving against impossible odds, and people helping each other during crisis. Here's what we missed, Reed continued. While every other species evolved to avoid conflict through surrender protocols, humans evolved to survive conflict itself. They don't just fight. They adapt, they improvise, they overcome. The Crystal World's representative moved through the displays. This explains their strange battle tactics. They're not being illogical. They're drawing from thousands of years of fighting experience. Exactly. Reed brought up new data. We found something remarkable in their entertainment too. Humans create stories about beating impossible odds. They imagine victories against powers far greater than themselves. They dream about it, write about it, make it part of their culture. The displays shifted to show human movies, books, and games. Stories of small groups overcoming powerful enemies appeared again and again. They're training themselves, someone whispered. Even their entertainment prepares them for resistance. Vale, who had been quietly watching, spoke up. During our battle, I saw a human ship lose all its weapons. Instead of surrendering, they used their broken pieces as projectiles. Who thinks like that? Humans do, Reed answered. They have endless examples in their history of turning defeats into victories. They call it thinking on your feet, or making the best of a bad situation. Where we see failure, they see opportunity. The council members watched as more historical footage played. Humans had fought wars across their entire planet. They had faced natural disasters, plagues, and countless challenges. Yet they had survived and grown stronger. There's something else, Reed added. Something we never considered. Humans don't just refuse to surrender. They actually get more dangerous when they're cornered. He showed data from recent battles. Human ships fought harder when damaged. Ground forces became more creative when outnumbered. Every defeat seemed to make them more determined. They call it backs against the wall. Reed explained. When escape is impossible, they stop looking for ways out and start looking for ways to win. Any way to win. The Trade Federation representative shook his head. This goes against all logical behavior patterns. Species should become less effective when facing certain defeat. That's what makes humans unique, Reed said. They've turned their greatest weakness, their refusal to surrender, into their greatest strength. They don't follow surrender protocols because they've spent their entire history learning how not to surrender. Vale looked troubled. Then how do we beat an enemy that grows stronger the more we press them? Reed turned to face the council. Perhaps that's the wrong question. Maybe instead we should ask, what could the galaxy become if we had humans as allies instead of enemies? The chamber fell quiet, as everyone considered this idea. On the displays, Earth's history continued to play, showing a species that had never learned to give up, and had grown stronger because of it. Commander Vale stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In the 3 weeks since the first battle, the humans hadn't grown weaker. They had grown stronger. His fleet had lost another 30 ships, and the humans were still coming up with new ways to fight. Sir, his second-in-command reported, the humans are sending out cargo ships again. Ignore them, Vale ordered. Focus on their military vessels. Those cargo ships are just trying to escape the battle zone. He was wrong. The cargo ships suddenly changed course, their holds opening to release thousands of small objects. Vale's tactical officer shouted a warning too late. The objects were simple but clever. Mirrors. Thousands of mirrors, spinning in space, reflecting light, and confusing the Meridian targeting systems. They're using our own sensor technology against us, Vale realized. Their warships can hide in the chaos of reflections. Before his fleet could adjust, human vessels struck from multiple directions. They had hidden their ships behind a cloud of mirrors, turning a simple cargo of construction materials into a tactical advantage. In the Council observation chamber, Ambassador Reed watched the battle unfold. Next to him, representatives from other worlds studied the humans' tactics with growing interest. "Notice how they use everything," Reed pointed out. Those cargo ships were hardly a threat, but the humans found a way to make them valuable in battle. The Crystal World's representative sparkled with curiosity. "They're not just fighting. They're solving problems. Each time we block one tactic, they create two more." The displays showed more of the battle. A human mining vessel, which should have been useless in combat, was using its drilling laser to cut through Meridian shield frequencies. A passenger liner, evacuated of civilians, became a massive decoy that drew fire away from Earth's warships. "They're adapting faster than we can." Vale's voice came through the command channel. "Every time we develop a counter to their tactics, they're already trying something new." Reed zoomed in on a particular battle scene. A small group of Earth fighters had discovered that flying in tight formations confused Meridian targeting computers. The computers were programmed to track single ships, not groups moving as one. "Look here," Reed pointed. "They're learning and sharing information in the middle of battle. When one group finds a weakness, all their forces adapt to exploit it within minutes." The Trade Federation representative shook his head. "This defies all military doctrine. Their ships are inferior. Their weapons are primitive. They should have been defeated days ago." "Perhaps," Reed suggested, "we need to reconsider what makes a species strong. The humans lack our technology, but they make up for it with creativity and determination." On the main display, Vale's fleet was struggling with a new human tactic. Earth's forces had noticed that Meridian ships always maintained perfect formation. Now they were using that predictability against them, forcing Meridian ships to either break formation or crash into each other while dodging attacks. "They've turned the battle into a puzzle," the Crystal World's representative observed. "Each of our weaknesses becomes their next solution." Vale's voice came through again, tense with frustration. "They're forcing us to fight like them, to think on the move, to break protocol. But our crews aren't trained for this. We don't know how to fight without rules." Reed watched as more Meridian ships fell to human tactics. "That's their true strength. Humans don't just break the rules. They never learn to rely on them in the first place. Every battle is new to them, every challenge an opportunity to innovate." The council chamber grew quiet as they watched the battle continue. The mighty Meridian fleet, one of the strongest in the galaxy, was being systematically taken apart by a species that should have surrendered weeks ago. "We need to rethink everything," Reed said softly. "The humans aren't just fighting us. They're teaching us that our protocols have made us predictable. And in space, being predictable can be fatal." The Grand Council chamber had never been so quiet. 500 representatives sat in their seats, watching the final battle footage from Earth. The Meridian Empire's finest fleet was retreating, reduced to less than half its original size. Not by superior technology, not by better weapons, but by a species that simply refused to follow the rules. Ambassador Reed stood at the center of the chamber, his voice echoing in the silence. "The Meridian Empire, one of our strongest members, has requested withdrawal from the Earth campaign. For the first time in 10,000 years, a council-backed military action has failed." Murmurs filled the chamber. The Trade Federation representative spoke first. "This is impossible. The protocols have never failed before." "The protocols didn't fail," Reed corrected. "They met something they weren't designed for. A species that treats them as a starting point rather than an ending point." The main display showed the battle statistics. The Meridian Empire had lost 167 ships. Earth's forces had lost more, but they had achieved something unprecedented. They had forced a superior force to retreat. "We have three options," Reed continued. "First, we can send a larger fleet. Second, we can maintain a blockade of their system. Or third," he paused, looking around the chamber, "we can admit that we found a species that requires a completely new approach." Commander Vale's hologram appeared next to Reed. His uniform was wrinkled, his expression tired. "I support the third option. Sending more ships won't help. The humans, they learn from every battle. The longer we fight them, the more dangerous they become." The Crystal World's representative's surface flickered with concern. "But if we change our approach for humans, other species might question the protocols. The entire system could break down." Reed touched a control, bringing up new images. "Look at how the humans fight. They don't just resist. They innovate. They don't just survive. They adapt. Every defeat makes them stronger. Every challenge makes them more creative." The images showed human ships using tactics no one had seen before. Small fighters flying in formations that confused targeting systems. Cargo ships turned into makeshift weapon platforms. Civilian vessels acting as decoys and intelligence gatherers. "The humans have something we've lost," Reed explained. "While we've relied on protocols, they've kept their ability to think freely. While we've become predictable, they've stayed creative." Vale nodded. "In our last battle, they used our own transmissions to predict our movements. They noticed patterns in our communications that we didn't even know existed. They don't just fight. They study, they learn, they evolve." The Trade Federation representative stood up. "But if we accept this behavior, what happens to our protocols? What happens to 10,000 years of peace?" "Peace?" Reed asked quietly. "Or stagnation? The humans have shown us something important. Our protocols don't just control warfare. They limit thinking. We've become so focused on following rules that we've forgotten how to adapt." The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued for maintaining the old ways. Others saw the potential in what humanity offered. The discussion grew heated, with thousands of years of tradition clashing against the undeniable evidence before them. Finally, a quiet voice spoke from the back of the chamber. An elder member of the council, known for his wisdom, stood up. "Perhaps," he said, his voice carrying despite its softness, "the humans are not a threat to our protocols, but an opportunity to evolve them. Maybe they've appeared at this moment to teach us what we've forgotten. That rules should guide us, not limit us." The chamber fell silent again. Reed looked at the displays showing Earth's forces, still preparing for the next battle that might come. "The question isn't whether humans will follow our protocols," he said. "The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from those who never needed them." The Grand Council chamber looked different today. For the first time in its history, the rigid seating arrangement had been changed. In the center of the chamber stood a round table, with seats for both council representatives and the newly arrived human delegation. Ambassador Reed watched as Admiral Rogers of the United Earth Defense Force took his seat. The human wore a simple blue uniform, so different from the ornate robes of the council members. Yet somehow he commanded just as much respect. "Welcome to the first meeting of the Reformed Galactic Council," Reed announced. "Today we implement the Human Exception Clause, the first major change to our protocols in 10,000 years. Commander Vale, now serving as the liaison between the Meridian Empire and Earth, stood to speak. My fleet's defeat taught us something valuable. The old protocols didn't just regulate warfare, they regulated thinking. The humans showed us a better way." Admiral Rogers looked around the table. "We never understood why you expected us to surrender. In our history, some of our greatest victories came after our darkest moments. We learned to keep fighting, keep thinking, keep trying, no matter what." The main display showed the new protocols being added to the Council's ancient records. The Human Exception Clause was simple but revolutionary. In recognition that innovation surpasses regulation, protocols shall serve as guidelines rather than absolutes. The right to resist shall not be denied. But how do we maintain peace without strict protocols? asked the Trade Federation representative, still uncertain about the changes. Rogers smiled. On Earth, we have something called sports. Games where people compete, but with rules that guide rather than control. The best players are the ones who find creative ways to succeed while respecting the spirit of the game. Reed nodded. That's what the new protocols will be. Guidelines that encourage innovation while preventing unnecessary destruction. We're not abandoning order. We're making it flexible enough to grow. The Crystal World's representative sparkled with enthusiasm. Already, our military academies are studying human battle tactics. Not to copy them, but to understand how they think. How they turn problems into opportunities. And it's not just military applications, Vale added. Human problem-solving approaches are being adapted for everything from trade negotiations to scientific research. They've shown us that creativity thrives when it's not bound by rigid rules. Rogers looked pleased, but slightly embarrassed by the praise. We just did what we've always done, faced each challenge as it came, used what we had, and never gave up. We didn't know we were doing anything special. That's exactly what makes it special, Reed said. You never learned to depend on protocols, so you never stopped thinking for yourselves. Now you can teach that skill to the rest of us. The new council session continued, with humans and aliens working together to reshape the galaxy's approach to challenges. The rigid hierarchy of the past was giving way to something more dynamic, more adaptable, more human. On the main display, a message appeared, replacing the old surrender protocols. Victory is not in the strength of your weapons, but in the strength of your resolve. Innovation surpasses protocol. Determination overcomes superiority. Never surrender your right to think differently. As Reed watched humans and aliens working together, he remembered that first battle, when everyone thought the humans were being irrational. Now he understood. They weren't ignoring protocol. They were showing the galaxy a better way. The humans never needed to learn our surrender protocols, Reed said quietly. We needed to learn their survival protocols. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle. It's in changing the rules of the game. Outside the council chamber, Earth ships and alien vessels flew together in new formations, each learning from the other. The galaxy was changing, growing, adapting. All because one species had never learned how to give up.